And sorry I didn't set you up for this week. Well, I don't know about you, but I always love when the high school band leads us. Part of it is I love seeing my two kids up there, and my niece. You want your guitar, Dan? Do you want me to get it for you? I can. Clark's got it. I see Dan back there going. We have been in Matthew, and that's where we'll be again this morning. We have just come out of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is teaching on the side of this hill, and we are headed into some pretty amazing things that Jesus did. So he was saying all these amazing things for 3 chapters, and now he's going to do a bunch of things for a couple of chapters. And we're actually covering a lot of material this morning, a lot of verses, but it's all kind of centered around the same idea, which is that Jesus was a pretty amazing guy and a unique guy in all of history. In fact, much of what we'll be looking at this morning is Jesus doing some pretty amazing things and then watching people's reactions to those things. And they vary widely, these reactions to him. So let me pray for us, and we will get into what we're talking about this morning. Lord, I'm just so thankful for this passage. It's been really good just to look at it this week, to look at your son, to look at just the immense amount of proof that he was who he claimed to be, that he was the Messiah, the Son of God, and that really I think the evidence is so overwhelming that from my perspective, I don't understand how anyone can deny the truth of who he is. But somehow, because of the fall, somehow because of our hearts, we have deceived ourselves. And we reject this one that you sent to us over 2,000 years ago. But it's still mind-boggling to me how we could do that. I just pray for us this morning that as we look at this with our eyes of faith, our eyes of trusting in you and trusting in what your son has done, that we would just be just amazed at who he is, and that we would have the proper response this morning, which is to fall down on our knees and to worship him. Pray this all in your name. Amen. So really the crux of what we're going to be looking at today lands right in the middle of this passage that we're going to look at today, which is this statement made by the disciples that says, "What kind of man is this?" They're trying to figure out, they're spending time with Jesus, they're trying to figure out, what category do we put Jesus in? Because he just keeps blowing away their categories. And so let's look together at what kind of man Jesus is. It says this: when Jesus came down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. So keep in mind, this is right after the Sermon on the Mount. He was just up on the side of this hill, and he was giving this teaching, and now he's coming down from the hill, and these large crowds that had gathered around to hear his teaching are now following him. They're like, we got to check this guy out. These things he said were amazing. In fact, in the verse right before this, it says that they were amazed, they were astounded, their jaws dropped over what Jesus said and the authority with which he taught. And so they wanted to see more, and they're going to see more. In fact, they're going to see a lot more. It says this: and a leper came to him and bowed down before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, "I'm willing, be cleansed." and immediately his leprosy was cleansed. And Jesus said to him, "See to it that you tell no one, but go show yourself to the priest and present the offering that Moses commanded as a testimony to them." So this guy comes up to Jesus. He has leprosy, which is a very scary, nasty disease. Today, they call it Hansen's disease. It is a serious bacterial infection that affects your skin. You get disfiguring sores. In fact, I was going to show a picture, and I was like, I think I'm not going to do that because it's just nasty. I mean, it's really, really bad. And it really causes severe disfiguration, severe weakness in that person, where it's hard for them to even get around and to move around. It many times causes blindness. It causes some severe nerve damage in the body, which actually causes people to lose feeling, which is a real dangerous thing, because if you don't have feeling, then if you're being hurt by something, you can't even sense it. And so it's very, very common for those with leprosy to lose fingers and toes and things like that, because they just can't feel pain. And so it's bad. It's really bad. Today, surprisingly, there are still about 180,000 cases a year of leprosy, mostly in Africa and Asia. And I was actually surprised by this, that there's 100 cases a year in the United States of leprosy. I was like, wow. But in this time, because it was this infectious disease, and it was infectious. It's not super infectious, but it definitely is an infectious disease. You can pass it on. And it was so scary to see someone with leprosy. You would be like, I never want to have that. These people were outcasts in society. They were not allowed to participate in society. And so it was a very, very lonely life led by these people with leprosy. And in Judea and in the Jewish culture for a couple thousand years, the priests were actually the ones who determined what to do with a leper and who had leprosy. They were trained, you can see this in Leviticus 13 and 14, they were trained to identify it and then make a determination, a judgment on whether they truly had leprosy or maybe just some sort of skin condition. And then they determined whether the person was clean or they were unclean. And if someone was found not to have leprosy, they were suspected to have leprosy, and they didn't have leprosy, then they came and they brought this offering to God. And that's what he's referring to here at the end. Go show yourself to the priest, because the priests have to make a determination. They got to give you a clean bill of health. Normally we'd go to a doctor today, but they would have to go to a priest to get the clean bill of health so they could function back in society. And then you make this offering that was part of the old covenant commandments. And so that's the situation we have here. This guy coming to Jesus with this terrible, terrible disease. But listen to the faith of this guy. He doesn't say, hey, if you're able to, would you give healing me a try? Would you just maybe touch me and let's see what happens? No, he's like, you can make me clean. There's no question. He knew this man. He knew what category to place this man in, and this man is a healer. He can do this. There's no question. Today, if you have leprosy, it is curable, but it takes 6 months to a year or even more of intense antibiotic treatment to deal with this situation. Jesus, immediately. In fact, Matthew's going to continue to use words like this throughout what we're talking about today. Immediately, the man's leprosy was dealt with. Not an issue anymore. And I didn't mention this before, but I'll mention this now. we're gonna just go from snapshot to snapshot to snapshot to snapshot. And the reason why we're covering so much material today is that Matthew's really making one point in this chapter in 3/4 that we're gonna look at today, because he just takes all of these snapshots like this and he makes them really kind of in summary form. We have a lot of these miracles in the other accounts, but they have a lot of detail added into them. Matthew's just like, look at this. Look what Jesus did here. And then look what Jesus did here. So we've got this, and he's going to keep hitting on this. He's going to keep going. By the way, he says, tell no one. Tells this guy, let's not let this get out. Which, by the way, if he's trying to sell himself, this is not a great sales technique, right? We talked about that last week. Like, yeah, this amazing thing just occurred, but shh, don't tell anybody. I don't want this to get out. Like, what is he doing? And we don't actually know what he's doing. I suspect what he's trying to do is make sure that they don't try to make him king so quickly, because they're going to try to do that, right? And that they focus on who he is, not on all this miraculous stuff that he's doing and the fervor. Although that's going to happen too. But I think he's trying to hold that back a little bit. So he goes on. Second snapshot. And when Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, imploring him, and saying, "Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, fearfully tormented." Jesus said to him, "I will come and heal him." But the centurion said, "Lord, I'm not worthy for you to come under my roof. Just say a word and my servant will be healed. For I am a man under authority with soldiers under me, and I will say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my slave, 'Do this,' and he does it." So this guy comes to Jesus, this Roman centurion. Important to understand that this is not a Jewish person that Jesus is talking to right here. This would be a Gentile soldier who comes to him. And he says, "My servant is paralyzed. Will you come? Will you do something?" He said, "Yeah, I'll come." He actually doesn't say, "Will you come?" He says, "Will you do something?" And he says, "I'll come. I'll heal him. I'll deal with this situation." But listen to the centurion's faith. Listen to how he responds to Jesus. He's like, No. Don't come into my house. I'm not worthy to have you in my house. He's placing Jesus in a category, and that category is highly exalted King, Messiah. No. My house is not good enough for you. But, you know what? I'm a military guy. This is my life. This is what I know. And I know that I have people who are under me, I have people who are over me that tell me what to do, right? And I have to do it. And I have people under me that I tell them what to do, and they have to do it. In fact, in the Roman military, if they didn't do it, death was probably the result of that. You had to do it. Like, you follow orders. That's what you do. It says that's how it works in my world. I know that you have much more power than I do. And that's how it can definitely work in your world. I order and they do. You order, it'll happen. I manage men. I tell them where to go and what to do. You manage the whole physical world. Not just, see, the crazy thing about this is when you think about things that we do. Like, just think about the things that you do in your life. When you do something, you're usually present to do that thing. If I'm going to pick up this remote, I'm going to have to be physically present to pick up this remote, right? That's just how life works. When we do something, we're there to do the thing that we're supposed to do. And that's how it worked in the first century for sure. And this guy thinks completely outside of the box and says, no, just say it. And it'll be done. What kind of faith is that? Crazy faith. And he says, now when Jesus heard this, he marveled. He was amazed. He was shocked. He said to those who were following, truly I say to you, I have not found such great faith with anyone in Israel. I say to you that many will come from east and west and recline at the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the sons of the kingdom will be cast out into outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. This would not have gone over well with his hearers. For one, he's like, no one in Israel, no Jewish person I have ever met has this kind of faith. And this is an outsider, a Gentile, someone who's not a part of the people of God, and he's got greater faith than I have ever seen in all of my days. He's got greater faith. And then he goes beyond that and he says, you know what? What's going to happen eventually is people from the east and the west, people from all over the world are going to sit and eat in the kingdom with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. No. For one, having a meal with someone was a very intimate thing. You only ate with people who you should have fellowship with, where it's right to have fellowship with them. And definitely, you never ate with a Gentile. Ever. That would actually make you ceremonially unclean. You couldn't do that. You don't eat with them. So I'm definitely not going to eat with a Gentile. I'm not going to eat with the centurion. I don't think so. Or anybody from outside the nation of Israel. And if I'm not going to do it, definitely the big three aren't going to do it. Right? Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, no. It's like, no. In fact, they're going to fill the table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And on top of that, some of the Israelites, some of the people of God are not even going to be at the table. They're going to be cast out. This would not have gone over well. Verse 13 says, Jesus said to the centurion, go, it shall be done for you as you have believed, faithed, as you have trusted me, as you have trusted in who I am and my ability, exactly what you think is going to happen, and I'm going to heal him, I think right now, from miles away. And guess what happened? The servant was healed that very moment. Done. Who is this guy? Who is this guy? Goes on, it says, when Jesus came into Peter's home, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick in bed with a fever. He touched her hand and the fever left her. She got up and waited on him. When evening came, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were ill. This was to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet. He himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. So the first thing here is he goes into Peter's house. Peter's mother-in-law has a fever. Fever always indicates sickness, right? So she has some sort of a sickness that's causing a fever. He touches her hand, sickness gone, fever gone, done. And in fact, she was in such good health that she just got up and started waiting on them, serving them. And then the evening time came and a bunch of people were brought who were demon-possessed. I don't love the word demon-possessed. Maybe I've seen too many horror movies or whatever with possession. Like the Greek word actually indicates more like demonized, like tormented by demons. And so there were these people that were brought to them who were being tormented by demons. And he cast out the spirits. Cast out, it just means sends them away. He sends away the spirits. Stop tormenting that person with a word. Do you get Matthew's emphasis here? He's like, immediately, instantly, that very moment, just a word. Like we see movies of like people who can like heal, they have like superpowers or whatever, they can heal or whatever, and they're like, oh, and like their hands glow or something, and they're like, oh goodness, and like it takes a while or whatever, and it's like, no, Jesus is like, I don't know what word he used, but he's like, adios. I don't know what the word was, but just, it's nothing. His power's so great, it was like nothing to just get out of here. Done with you. And then Matthew's emphasis, of course, he also says, and he healed all who were ill. Everybody who brought, just kind of a blanket statement. Each and every person that was brought to him who were ill, their sickness went away. And then Matthew's emphasis, if we remember this, is Jesus as the Messiah. He's trying to make a case for Jesus being the Messiah, the Son of God. The sent one, the chosen one, the promised one. And so we've seen already, since the beginning of Matthew, so many times where he's like, Jesus fulfilled this, and he fulfilled this, and he fulfilled this, and he fulfilled this. Everything pointing back to Jesus as Messiah, 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 Messiah. And here's one more time. He says, this is to fulfill what was spoken through Isaiah the prophet, like 770-ish years before this. Isaiah said, he himself took our infirmities and carried away our diseases. This is fulfillment right here. So the point on your handout, if you want to fill it in, is Jesus' power over physical afflictions demonstrates he is the Messiah. Jesus' power over physical afflictions demonstrates he is the Messiah. I don't know about you, I think about the skeptic, the one who's unsure about whether following Jesus is the right way to go. People in this crowd that were with him that were trying to figure out who he was. I would be convinced at this point, right? Like he's casting out demons like it's nothing. He's healing like it's nothing. He's leprosy, that crazy, nasty disease, like instantly the sores and everything are gone. The disfigurement, it's gone. Like I would be won over at this point. I would have no question what I need to do, how I need to respond. But he goes on. He says, now when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave orders to depart to the other side of the sea. By the way, Jesus does this a lot, which is kind of interesting to me, that when the crowds start to gather, when there's massive crowds kind of pushing in on him, he's always like, let's get out of here. Like, I would think like Jesus would be like, okay, I'm a rock star now, let's pump up the troops. Like, let's stick around, let's see if we can get a few more thousand in this auditorium. They're not in an auditorium, but let's get a few more people in, right? Let's just get bigger and bigger and bigger. I want to start this huge movement, this huge Messiah movement. Let's see the masses come in and crowds come around. He's like, okay, let's get out of here. Take me somewhere else. And that's what he does here. And as he's going to get into the boat, it says, then a scribe came and said to him, teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus said to him, the foxes have holes and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Another of the disciples said to him, Lord, permit me first to go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, follow me and allow the dead to bury their own dead. So you got a couple of guys here. We don't know their responses, by the way. I kind of wish we had their responses, but we don't, because that's not the point here. That's not Matthew's point that he's getting to. It's not what their response is. It's what Jesus' requirement was. You have a scribe coming to him, which is interesting because these scribes are typically shown in a negative light, not as people who want to follow Jesus. These are these teachers of the law and students of the law who just knew everything there was to know about the Old Testament covenant, the Old Covenant. They had it down and they were teaching other people about it. And so you have one of these guys who heard Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. He's watching Jesus do all these amazing things, and he's like, hey, I will follow you wherever you go. It's actually probably better understanding here. It's not. He wasn't making like a lifelong commitment here. He was saying like wherever you're going, like wherever you're headed right now, like Jesus is getting onto the boat, right? He's like, wherever you're going, I'll come with you. I want to go with you. I want to see more. I want to hear more. And we expect Jesus to go, hey, I've got an interested follower here. So, come on. Seems like you like me a little bit. This is a good thing. You can be a follower of mine. That's what a good salesman would do. You've got interest. They want to buy the car, right? They really like the car. Just sell them the car. Like, give them the contract, right? He's like, no, you know what? If you want to come with me, like, you're going to be homeless because I don't have a house. Foxes have a house. Birds have a place to lay their head, but nope, not me. Still interested? And then another disciple comes and says, hey, you know what? I just need to go to my dad's funeral. Presumably his dad had just died and there was an immediate thing. People had to be buried within 24 hours. And so we're going to go. I need to go right now. Like, I just need to go. But I'll be back. Like, I'm just going to go to my dad's funeral and mourn him. And Jesus is like, no. You can't go to your dad's funeral. How about you? It seems a little rude to me. Like, Jesus, give the guy a break. He just wants to go bury his dad. He just wants to go mourn his dad. I think we have a picture. I think the only reason why we might have a problem with this, the reason why I have a problem with this, is that we have a picture of following Jesus that involves like kind of including Jesus in our lives. Like, we're going to do our things. We're going to live our lives the way we live our lives, and we're going to like, Jesus will be a part of what I'm doing, a slice of the pie. Jesus is like, no, I'm everything. I am the priority of your life. But no, overbearing my dad? Yeah, overbearing your dad. Yep. Over the comfort of my house? Yeah, over the comfort of your house. I think we get in our minds somehow that like Jesus would never ask me to do whatever. Really? I think he would. I mean, he clearly does. Jesus would never ask me to skip my dad's funeral. Really? Yeah, he just did. Jesus would never ask me to be homeless. Really? He just did. Jesus would never ask me to give up my stuff, or at least not a great portion of my stuff. Really? He's going to do it in Matthew 19. Jesus would never ask me to prioritize my family. I'm a family man. Jesus would never ask me to prioritize my family, or prioritize him over my family. Really? He's going to do that in Matthew 10. Jesus' call on our lives is everything. Nothing held back. What he says goes. That's what he was looking for from these people. It's not that either of these guys he was saying, don't come with me. He was saying, come with me. He was just saying it's going to cost you everything to come with me. It's going to cost you a lot. So then he got into a boat. When he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. And behold, there arose a great storm on the sea, so that the boat was being covered with the waves. But Jesus himself was asleep. And they came to him and woke him, saying, "Save us, Lord, we are perishing." He said to them, "Why are you afraid, you men of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and it became perfectly calm. The men were amazed and said, "What kind of man is this that even the winds and the sea obey him?" So there's this great storm that comes up when they're out in the boat. Great storm means severe, fierce, intense, a very massive storm. This wasn't a hurricane, but I think hurricane, right? Like serious typhoon, so much so that the water and the waves were coming so high that they were crashing over the boat. That's boat sinking situation. And they just were crashing over and over. And you can see probably the disciples with buckets trying to get the water out of the boat, and they're losing the battle. And they're scared. And keep in mind that at least a few of these guys are fishermen, right? These are guys who are boat guys, seafarers. And they are freaking out. This was a real storm. So they go to Jesus, who's sleeping. Must have been a deep sleeper. They came to him, they woke him, and they said, "Save us, Lord. We're perishing. The boat is going down." They fully believe that the boat is going down and we're all going to die. And I would expect Jesus at this point, it's a serious storm, right? I would expect Jesus at this point to go, "Thanks for waking me, guys. Yeah, let me take care of this. Let me see what we can do about this. Because this is serious." But instead he's like, "What are you afraid of?" "Well, I'm afraid of this, Jesus. Like, what's going on right now? That's what I'm afraid of." It's like, you men of little faith. Keep in mind, these guys had heard all of his teaching. They had seen all of these amazing things that we just covered, and they're going to see a lot more. And you contrast that with the centurion and his faith, who's like, "You don't even have to show up at my house and you can heal my servant." Just like that. How they should have responded if they had Jesus in the right category, which is miracle worker, God of the universe, is they should have gone, "You know what, we're fine." Could Jesus have calmed the wind and the waves from his sleep? Sure, he could have. Sure, he could have. It's like, you men of little faith. And you know what? Maybe you are perishing. You don't think I care about that? You don't think I think about that? You have too little faith here to know me, to understand me. He got up, he rebuked the winds and the sea, and it became perfectly calm. I love these little statements that Matthew makes. It's just not that the storm was over. It was that pretty quickly, like glassy sea, calm, beautiful. What a wonderful day to be out on the sea. Just with a couple words. The men were amazed. Yeah. I don't know if amazed is really the right response here, because it should almost be to the point where they're like, "Yep, that's Jesus. Like, that's just the way he rolls," right? If they truly had him in the right category and had the right faith, they'd be like, "Yeah, that's just him." But instead they were shocked. And they said, "What kind of man is this?" Like, he's blowing away all of the categories. I don't even know what category of man to put him in. Is he a good man? Do we put him in that category? Is he a prophet of God? Is he a powerful teacher? Is he a miracle worker? Is he a weatherman? I don't know what he is, but he's something, and I don't know what the category is for him. That even the winds and the sea obey him. Who is this guy? And I'm going to suggest their problem was, their lack of faith, which they clearly had, was rooted in the fact that they did not know him. They did not understand how to categorize him. Because we look back and we go, "He's the Son of God. This is child's play to him. Like, don't freak out. Not a big deal," right? Because we've placed him in the right category. But they hadn't figured that out yet. They didn't have a clear picture of him, and so their faith was not strong enough to be placed into this Jesus because they didn't understand him yet. And I'm going to suggest that that's where our little faith comes from, too. We don't understand him as well as we should understand him. I don't understand him the way I should understand him, or else I would trust him. He's trustworthy, 100% trustworthy. No matter how big this massive storm was, he was 100% trustworthy. We got to put him in the right category. So put on your handout if you want to fill it in. Is faith required people to decide what kind of person Jesus was? Faith required people to decide what kind of person Jesus was. All right, the hits are going to just keep coming. It says, when he came to the other side of the country of the Gadarenes, two men who were demonized, met him as they were coming out of the tombs. They were so extremely violent that no one could pass by that way. And they cried out, saying, what business do we have with each other, Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before our time? Now there was a herd of many swine feeding at a distance from them. The demons began to entreat him, saying, if you're going to cast us out, if you're going to send us away, send us into the herd of swine. And he said to them, go. And they came out and they went into the swine, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and perished in the waters. The herdsmen ran away and went into the city and reported everything, including what had happened to the demoniacs. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they implored him, leave the region. So you have this situation where he's going over to this area around this city called Gadara, and it's a Gentile area. It's important to understand. You might have figured that out because there's a bunch of swine, a bunch of pigs there, like that. You wouldn't have that in Israel. They couldn't have pigs. They couldn't eat pigs. This was definitely a Gentile area that they were in. And you have these guys who are so demonized that they are violent men. They are dangerous men. And because of that, they couldn't live in the town. They were forced out of town to live in these tombs, this graveyard area. It's not a graveyard like we would think of a graveyard, but these tombs, these caves. And what's interesting here is that as Jesus comes up to these extremely violent men, they recognize him. That says something. The spiritual world knows this guy. Spiritual world looks at Jesus and they know what category to put him in. We're still figuring out what category to put him in. They were very clear on what category to put him in. He is the Son of God. And he is clearly, this is not a moment like where you have the two boxers coming into the ring and it's like, oh, who's going to win? And they're playing the music, dun, 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 and they're like, oh, who's going to battle? That wasn't what this is. This was clearly, no question, there was going to be no battle here. These guys weren't going, all right, we're ready. Let me buckle up. Bring it on, Jesus. No. They knew clearly who had the power here. Jesus, the one who could torment them, who could do anything he wanted to them. And not only could he do anything he wanted to right at this moment, he's that guy who has that kind of power, but they're pointing to a future time. He said, before the time when we're supposed to be tortured by you, the time when you're supposed to, exercise the power that we know that you have. So Jesus was not only one who had the power to do something here, but he also has a role in the future dealing with these guys. And they're like, please, you have all the power here. You have all the control here. How about the pigs? Can we go into the pigs? Like, is that okay? The one with all the power. And Jesus says, sure. So he sends them over to these pigs. These pigs, we know there was about 2,000 pigs. We know that from Mark. They run off the edge of a cliff and die. So then you have these herdsmen going back to the city, and they tell everything that had gone on, which presumably included in this would be the demons saying Jesus is the Son of God. That probably should be part of it. probably would include his power demonstrated over these demons and removing the demonization of these men. Like, this all would have been reported. And so, I don't know about you, but if I'm coming from this town, I'm hoping that my response is to get on my knees and bow down and worship the Son of God, who has immense and utter power to do whatever he wants at any time. But instead, they're freaked out because who knows what this guy with all this kind of power is going to do. So, like, can you just go away, please? What? Are you kidding me? Go somewhere else. And I don't know if the root of this was just simply fear of Jesus' immense power, which, I can understand that. Maybe it was like, you just killed 2,000 of our pigs. Like, we don't want you around. We need the pigs, right? I don't know what it is, but they didn't want him there. Like, go somewhere else, please. Probably the biggest mistakes of their lives. Goes on, he says, getting into a boat, Jesus crossed over the sea and came to his own city. He's back in Capernaum. And they brought to him a paralytic lying on a bed. Seeing their faith, Jesus said to the paralytic, "Take courage, son, your sins are forgiven." And some of the scribes said to themselves, "This fellow blasphemes." And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, said, "Why are you thinking evil in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or say, 'Get up and walk'? But so that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." Then he said to the paralytic, "Get up, pick up your bed, and go home." And he got up and went home. But when the crowd saw this, they were awestruck and glorified God, who had given such authority to men. So he has this guy who's brought to him. He is paralyzed. And his response, we would think at this point, he's kind of bang, bang, bang. Like, when people are brought to him, he's like healing their illnesses, right? And their ailments. And you would think that he's going to make this guy walk again, right? That would be what we're figuring out at this point. Like, that seems to be the pattern of what Jesus is doing. But instead, he does something different. He says, "I'm forgiving your sins." The response to that, the proper response to that, if Jesus is in the right category, Son of God, deity, the one who can forgive sins, should have been, "Man, that guy's lucky. Look what Jesus did for him. Look at that. Awesome. That guy's sins are forgiven. Wow." But the scribes didn't have Jesus in the right category. And so they said to themselves, "This fellow blasphemes." Blasphemes means to demean or to defame or to disrespect. And who are they claiming Jesus is demeaning or disrespecting? They're claiming he's demeaning God. He's disrespecting God. He's defaming God. Well, how does that work? How is he defaming God just by forgiving this guy's sins? Well, Mark actually helps us out with this because he adds a little phrase here. He says, "Why does this man speak this way? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone?" See, the problem is that Jesus was taking, and by the way, it's really bad to blaspheme. Leviticus 24:16 says you should kill, that you're supposed to kill someone who blasphemes God. So this is really serious, what they're accusing him of. In fact, when Jesus is before the high priest, Caiaphas, before his trial, before Pontius Pilate, what he's accused of, what he's convicted of is blasphemy. That's what he's convicted of. So eventually this does kill Jesus, their perception of him. Says this one blasphemes because you're taking something that's just God's domain, forgiveness is God's domain, and you're bringing it down to a human level and saying humans can forgive sins, which you cannot do. It brings God down. It defames him. And in fact, the phrase at the end seems to indicate that other people thought that's what was happening too, because they said they were awestruck and they glorified God who had given such authority to men. They thought now man has the ability to forgive sins. They didn't understand the category that Jesus was in, that he was a unique man in all of history that can actually deal with sin, address sin. He says, I'll prove to you that I can forgive sins by, okay, go, you can walk now. And the guy gets up, he takes his mat, he goes, see, I can forgive sins, and I can do that too. Not a problem if you put God in the right, you put Jesus in the right category. Big problem if you don't have him in the right category. Point on your handout is Jesus' power over spiritual matters demonstrates he is the Messiah. Jesus' power over spiritual matters demonstrates he's the Messiah. And he finishes off with this machine gun of things here. He says, as Jesus went on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting in a tax collector's booth. And he said to him, follow me. And he got up and followed him. Then it happened that Jesus was reclining at the table in the house. Behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were dining with Jesus and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why is your teacher eating with the tax collectors and the sinners? He's not supposed to do that. He's a Jewish rabbi. That's the category they had him in. But when Jesus heard this, he said, it is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice. For I did not come to call the righteous, but the sinners. It's like, you've got the wrong idea here. Yes, I'm sitting with sinners and tax collectors and those kind of people because I'm here for those kind of people. I'm here for those kind of people who recognize their need for help. I'm a helper. I'm a doctor. I'm the one who's going to provide a solution from them. You guys, who apparently are the guys I'm supposed to be having a meal with, you guys think you're good to go. You're totally wrong about that, by the way, but you think you're good to go. Is someone who, you ever have someone in your family, maybe your husband, who thinks, who something's wrong, right? And they're like, I don't need a doctor. I'm not going to the doctor. I'm good. I can push through it or whatever. You're like, go to the doctor, right? Because you need something. Like these Pharisees are like, I'm good. I don't need anything. I've made myself righteous. Good to go. It's like, yeah, I don't want to have a meal with you guys. I'm not here for you. I'm here for these guys who recognize their need, recognize they need to be healed. And you guys don't get it. He makes this statement. It's from Hosea. He says, I desire compassion and not sacrifice, or over sacrifice. These guys were making the same mistake that Israel was making in Hosea's time, because they were focusing on this outward obedience to God. They were doing what the law commanded at the time, but their hearts were far, far from God. It's the exact same problem that the Pharisees have. They didn't care about God. They just cared about their self-righteousness. Then the disciples of John came to him asking, why do we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast? Remember, fasting was a very, very common thing in the first century. In first century Judea, happened at least a couple times a year. The Pharisees did it every week. John's disciples looked like they did it every week too. They chose to do that. And Jesus said to them, the attendants of the bridegroom cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? But the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast. He's like, yeah, we're not really interested in fasting. I'm going to focus on this being a joyful time of being together, not a mournful time, which fasting indicates that. And if you recognized who I was, John's disciples who don't really recognize who he is in every interaction we see with them, if you put me in the right category, you wouldn't be questioning whether we should be fasting or not, because I'm the Son of God. I guess I can decide whether we're going to fast or not, right? Wrong category. And you don't get this principle, which is, but no one puts a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, or the patch pulls away from that garment and a worse tear results. Don't put a new patch on an old garment. New patch on a new garment, old patch on an old garment, those are fine. Nor do people put new wine in old wineskins. Otherwise, the wineskins burst, and the wine pours out, and the wineskins are ruined. But they put new wine into fresh wineskins, and both are preserved. Two examples of there's a new thing going on. Jesus is like, I've got a new thing going on. This whole thing that you're witnessing right now is a completely new thing. I'm going to institute the new covenant, which is a completely new thing. What you're trying to do is you're trying to take this new thing that I'm doing and force it into an old paradigm. That doesn't work. You just need to recognize this is a new paradigm, and you need to shift your thinking over to that. That was John's disciples' problem. While he was saying these things to them, a synagogue official came and bowed before him. So it's interesting, you have these different responses to Jesus, right? It's kind of back and forth, back and forth. This is going to be a good one. And he said, my daughter just died, but come and lay your hand on her and she will live. She will live. Listen to the faith in that. Jesus got up and began to follow him, and so did his disciples. All right, now we're going to veer off into like a side story real quick. He says, and a woman who had been suffering from a hemorrhage for 12 years came up to behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she was saying to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will get well. What kind of faith is that? It's like, I don't even need to approach Jesus. I don't even need to ask anything of Jesus. I probably shouldn't. I'm ceremonially unclean anyway. I don't want to interact with him. I don't want to get him ceremonially unclean. But if I just touch like a tassel on his cloak, that's all I need. That's all I need. He's that powerful. It's going to be taken care of. Whew. Serious faith. But Jesus turned to her and seeing her said, daughter, take courage. Your faith has made you well. At once, the woman was made well. When Jesus came into the official's house, back to the story we were on, and saw the flute players and the crowd in noisy disorder, he said, these are mourners, probably professional mourners, mourning during this funeral. He said, leave, for the girl has not died, but is asleep. And they began laughing at him. Oh, that's really funny. Because they all knew she was dead. And she was dead. But he's saying, yeah, that's only going to be a temporary state for her. But when the crowd had been sent out, he entered and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. This news spread throughout all the land. Of course it would. It's amazing. Are we getting at this point that Jesus was unique in all of human history? I don't know where you guys stand on modern day healings and stuff like that. We don't even need to talk about that. But let's just say this is very, very different. This is unique. From anything before and anything after, Jesus was a unique man on the earth. He has his own category. I don't even know what to title that category, but crazy, amazing, Son of God, Messiah, man. We could go on forever with that category. It's just, he's the only one in that category. Just a different guy. And Jesus went on from there. 2 blind men followed him, crying, have mercy on us, Son of David. We know what's going to happen now, right? When he entered the house, the blind men came up to him, and Jesus said to them, do you believe that I'm able to do this? Do you trust me? Do you have faith that I'm the kind of guy? Do you have the right category for me? And they said, yes. Yes, Lord, totally, you could do this. He touched their eyes, saying, it shall be done according to your faith. And their eyes were opened. Then again, Jesus sternly warned them, see to it that no one knows about this. Shh, be quiet about this. I don't want this to get out. What? But they went out and they spread the news about him throughout all the land. Those disobedient people. They just told everybody, which I would have a hard time not telling everybody. Especially they're like, hey, weren't you blind before? Yeah, just something happened. I don't know. You got to say something about it, right? Like, Jesus did it. It was amazing. As they were going out, a mute, demon-possessed man was brought to him. And after the demon was cast out, sent away, the mute man spoke. The crowds were amazed. And they were saying, nothing like this has ever been seen in Israel. And that's a correct statement. Not just in Israel, the whole world. But Pharisees were saying, he casts out demons by the ruler of demons. Same data, right? Same information. They had all seen the same things. They had all heard the same things from Jesus, seen the same things from Jesus, and you have these different responses that are so widely different. How does that happen? I'm going to suggest it's still happening today. People are still getting the same data, but their hearts are determining how they're going to categorize it. And the only category the Pharisees could come up with, because they're like, I don't know. He's not like a normal man because he does all this stuff. And the demons are helping him out. That's what's happened. Okay, I've got a new solution, right? No. Put on your handout is, some misunderstood who Jesus was and what he was accomplishing, and so responded badly. Others saw him clearly and placed an immense amount of faith in him and were not disappointed. Misunderstood, badly, faith. All right, let me finish up. I've gone a little over today. It says, there is absolutely no one like Jesus. He said things no one else had ever said and was doing things no one else had ever or has ever done. There have been many reactions to Jesus both in his time and in the centuries since. Was he just a good man or the man who was God? Was he a prophet who spoke for God or did he speak as God? Was he just a powerful teacher or the author of all truth? Was he simply a miracle worker within creation or the Lord over all creation? We all must decide for ourselves who he was and is. That decision will ultimately determine how we respond to him, and that response will provoke how he responds to us. What will you do with what he has done, and who is he to you? Let me pray for us. Lord, thank you for this morning. Thank you that we were able to get through all this material in the time that we had, maybe just a little over. Lord, I just pray that this would cause us to rightly categorize you, and that our response would be complete and utter worship, submission to you wherever you want us to go, whatever you want us to do, whatever you ask us to do, Lord, just help us to step right into that, because we know that you are the Son of God, the Messiah. Our lives are yours. Pray this all in your name. Amen. We're dismissed.